The world of Valora Prime floated in the quiet heart of the Union's border. For centuries, the Valorans lived in harmony, trading minerals, fabrics, and fine art across nearby systems. They were tall, slender beings with calm voices and gentle eyes. War was not in their nature. Their cities were open, their homes built under domes of crystal and light. Peace was their proudest achievement. But peace had no meaning to the Drakari swarm. The Drakari were not builders. They were not artists. They spread from system to system, devouring all resources and leaving ash behind. Their ships were dark-spined and shaped like claws. They came without warning, striking Valora Prime's outer colonies first. One world after another fell, and the Valorans, unprepared, could do little but watch. In desperation, the Valoran Council activated their ancient beacon. It was an old promise. If ever they were threatened beyond their ability, they could call for the help of the Galactic Union. The beacon signal raced across the stars. Help came, but it was not enough. Union fleets arrived, sleek silver ships armed with plasma cannons and protective shields. The Valorans cheered at first, believing the nightmare would end, but the swarm was too many, too fast. The Union forces fought bravely, but their lines were broken again and again. Inside the Valoran Capitol Dome, Councillor Eresh stood before the other leaders. His long fingers tapped against the table as a projection of the war spread across the map. "The swarm has broken through the second defense line," he said, his voice heavy. "The Union cannot hold. We must prepare for evacuation." The chamber filled with whispers. Evacuation meant leaving Valora Prime, their jewel, their homeworld. To the Valorans, it was unthinkable. Another councillor, Miles, shook his head. "There must be another answer. We sent the distress far beyond the Union sectors. Someone else must answer. Someone must come, but hope was fragile." The Drakari swarm pushed closer with every hour. On the Union flagship Resolute, Admiral Carroll paced the command deck. She had fought the swarm for years. Her officers reported heavy losses. "We've lost the southern flank," a lieutenant said. "We cannot reinforce. If the swarm pushes harder, Valora Prime will be within reach." Carell clenched her jaw. She had seen many species fall before the swarm. The Union was powerful, but the swarm was endless. Their numbers never seemed to run dry. "Any word from our outer allies?" she asked. "Nothing yet, Admiral." Only silence. Carroll turned to the window. Beyond the glass, she saw dozens of Union ships firing bright streams of energy into the dark void. The swarm's vessels moved like insects, darting, swarming, overwhelming every formation. She whispered almost to herself, "Who else could come? Who else would dare?" In the refugee dome below, Valoran families gathered. Children clung to their parents. The skies above the dome glowed red from the distant fires of battle. Stories spread through the crowd. Some said the Union had called for stronger fleets. Others whispered of old legends of strange newcomers to the stars, beings from a faraway blue and green world. Few believed the stories. Even fewer thought such newcomers could stand against the swarm. The next day, Valora's outer defense ring fell. Swarm forces poured into the system. The Union fleet retreated closer to the planet, barely holding a thin line. Councillor Eresh stood again before the map. His voice shook. "If no reinforcements come, Valora Prime will fall within 2 cycles." A heavy silence filled the chamber. The gentle Valorans, who had always trusted peace and diplomacy, now faced the end of their world. Then the signal came. Far out in the cold edge of the system, a new fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel. The Union's long-range scanners picked them up first. Officers shouted in surprise. The Admiral herself rushed to the console. "Identification?" she demanded. The officer checked the signal. "Unknown transponders. Wait, no. Not unknown. New. Sector code. Sol. Origin. Earth." Admiral Carell frowned. She had heard the name before. A death world, they called it. A harsh planet filled with storms, predators, diseases, and endless dangers. It was said that only the toughest creatures could survive there. And yet, against all odds, that world had given birth to a new starfaring race. Humans. The Union had barely begun to work with them. Most considered them reckless, unpredictable, too raw for real responsibility. But now it seemed they had come. The fleet was not large. Only a handful of heavy cruisers, a dozen fast strike ships, and carriers holding unknown weapons. Compared to the massive Union Navy, it looked small. But there was something unsettling in the way they moved. Tight formation, silent, precise. On the Valoran Capitol dome, people looked up at the night sky. Through the glass roof, they saw new lights shining, streaking into orbit. Whispers spread. They came. Someone came. Who are they? Humans. The Deathworlders. The word carried weight. Some said it with awe, others with fear. In the Union Command Center, Admiral Carell opened a channel. The screen lit up, showing a human commander. His uniform was plain, his face scarred by some old injury. His eyes were steady. "This is Commander Reed of Earth's Expeditionary Fleet," he said. His voice was calm but carried the weight of certainty. "We received your signal. Situation report?" Carell blinked, almost taken aback by his directness. "The swarm has broken through 3 lines. We are days away from losing Valora Prime. Your forces are not enough. You should retreat." Reed's expression didn't change. "Retreat is not an option. Send us your maps and swarm patterns. We will begin engagement at once." Carell studied him for a long moment. This man was no diplomat, no politician. He was a soldier. She sent the data. As the human fleet closed in, Union officers whispered among themselves. "Too few ships. They cannot hold against the swarm. Why do they even try?" But on the ground, the Valorans felt something different. For the first time in weeks, the people stopped whispering about evacuation. They looked up at the human fleet with fragile hope. Counselor Miles spoke softly as he stared at the sky. "They came when no one else would. Perhaps that means something." Counselor Arish, ever cautious, shook his head. "Or perhaps they will die and take us with them." The chamber grew quiet. None knew what would happen next. Beyond the world, the swarm turned toward the new arrivals. Dark ships spread like a wave, claws stretching across the void. The humans did not retreat. They did not scatter. They moved forward. For the first time in the war for Valora, a new sound filled the comm channels. A human voice rang out, steady and firm. "All units, this is Commander Reed. Deathworlders don't run. Let's show them why." And with that, the human fleet charged. The swarm's ships rushed forward like a black tide, their spined hulls twisting through the void. To the Valorans below, the sight was a nightmare they had come to fear. But now, another vision joined it. The human fleet advancing straight into the storm. The Union officers on the Resolute gasped as they watched. Most species would fall back, regroup, or wait for numbers to balance. The humans did not. Their formation was tight, their engines burning bright as they accelerated. Admiral Carroll stood at the center of the command deck, her silver uniform glowing in the dim light of holomaps. She leaned forward, her voice low. "They mean to meet the swarm head-on." "Admiral," one of her officers said quickly, "we should signal them to retreat. Their numbers are too few." But Carol shook her head. Something in her heart told her not to interrupt. She had led fleets for decades, and never before had she seen ships move like this. On the human flagship Iron Will, Commander Reed stood with arms crossed behind his back. His bridge crew moved with quiet discipline. They were young compared to other species officers, but there was a sharp focus in their eyes. "Status?" Reed asked. "All strike wings ready, sir," answered a pilot commander. "Weapons charged. Drones deployed." "Good, we'll cut into their front, not their sides. That will make them overcommit." Another officer frowned. "Sir, that puts us directly in their path." Reed's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "Exactly. Let them come." The first clash began. The swarm's vessels spat fire, streams of burning plasma lashing across space. To the Valorans watching through public view screens, it looked like a storm of red and black. The humans did not scatter. They plunged into the fire, shields sparking, hulls trembling. Then their counterattack came. Human strike craft darted from carriers like arrows loosed from a bow. Fast, agile, and heavily armed, they weaved through the swarm. Missiles streaked in every direction, striking the weaker joints of the enemy vessels. Union officers blinked in shock. "They're targeting the ventral nodes," one analyst whispered. "We never thought those mattered, but they did." Swarm ships burst open from inside, glowing with sudden explosions. Humans had found weak spots no one else had considered. From the Valoran dome, Counselor Mail stood among frightened citizens. The dome's great glass roof showed the battle in the sky. Children clutched their parents, pointing as small trails of light curved above them. "Look," Mail whispered. "They are not running. They are holding." Beside him, Counselor Arish frowned. "It is reckless. Their fleet will break," but even he could not look away. For the first time, the swarm ships wavered, breaking formation to chase the darting human craft. On the ground, Union soldiers prepared for the worst. Many had fought the swarm before and expected another retreat. But news came through comms. Human strike teams request landing clearance. The soldiers blinked in disbelief. Landing? The swarm still holds orbit. Yet it was true. Human dropships cut through the chaos, descending like fiery meteors into Valora Prime's atmosphere. They landed near the outer defense zones where the swarm had already begun pressing on the ground. From the first moment, the difference was clear. Union soldiers fought bravely but cautiously. They relied on cover, heavy weapons, and careful formations. The swarm, fast and relentless, often broke through those lines. The humans, however, fought with a style that shocked everyone. They moved fast, setting traps, laying mines, drawing the swarm into narrow paths. Their armor was scratched, dented and burned, but they did not slow down. Where one fell, two more pushed forward. They seemed to accept danger as a simple fact of life, not something to fear. Valoran civilians hiding in bunkers watched in awe. They had expected these Deathworlders to be wild and uncontrolled. Instead, they were organized, clever, and fierce. One Valoran child tugged her mother's arm. "They don't stop," she whispered. "They don't get scared." Her mother, eyes wide, could only nod. Back in orbit, Admiral Carell could not remain silent any longer. She opened a channel to read. His face appeared on her screen, calm even as the battle raged behind him. "Commander," Carell said, "your tactics are unconventional. You expose your ships dangerously." Reed's eyes flicked toward her, steady as stone. "Admiral, with respect, we come from a world where danger is every sunrise. We don't avoid it. We survive it. That is what we do." Carol studied him for a long moment. She wanted to argue, to call his methods reckless, but the evidence was before her. The swarm lines, always so solid, were cracking. Hours passed. The first day of battle ended with something no Valoran had seen before. The swarm retreating from orbit. Not destroyed, but shaken. They pulled back to regroup, leaving burning wreckage behind. For the Valorans, it was a miracle. For the Union officers, it was a lesson. For the humans, it was only the beginning. That night, within the Valoran Capitol Dome, the council met again. The air was tense, but no longer hopeless. Councillor Mal's voice carried pride. "The humans came when all others failed. Already they have pushed the swarm back. Perhaps we should speak of alliance." Councillor Eresh, still cautious, raised his hands. "Do not mistake bravery for victory. The swarm is vast. This battle is only one of many. The humans are strong, yes, but they are too few." "Too few?" Mal shot back. "Then why did their small number succeed where larger fleets failed?" The chamber grew quiet. Even Aresh had no easy answer. Meanwhile, in a Union barracks, soldiers whispered about what they had seen. They run straight at them. "They fight like predators." "No, not predators, survivors. They act like every battle is just another storm." An older Union captain spoke softly, almost with respect. "That is what it means to be from a death world." They were shaped by danger before they ever reached the stars. The swarm was not beaten. In the dark void beyond the system, their commanders rallied, planning the next assault. They had never faced prey that fought back with such fury. The humans puzzled them. They were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. But they were the most stubborn, and stubbornness could break even the swarm's endless hunger. Back aboard the Iron Will, Commander Reed gathered his officers. The room smelled faintly of oil and metal. His crew looked exhausted but unshaken. "The swarm will return," Reed said plainly. "They always do. But now they know. They know we are here," he pointed to the map. "We'll strike first next time, not wait. We'll bleed them where they least expect it. That's how you fight predators. You don't let them circle. You hit them until they learn to fear." The officers nodded, their eyes sharp. For them, this was not hopeless war. It was just another fight. Like so many on their homeworld. On Valora Prime, the people whispered a new word in the night. Not Union, not swarm, humans. Children asked who they were. Elders repeated the stories. A people from a world of storms, quakes, and predators. A people who thrived where others would perish. A people who had come when no one else did. The Valorans began to hope. The Union began to wonder. The swarm began to fear, and above them all the human fleet waited silent and steady, ready for the next storm. The swarm returned sooner than expected. 2 cycles after their retreat, dark shapes appeared again at the edge of the Valoran system. They came in greater numbers this time, hundreds of ships pressing forward, their spines catching the light of Valora's sun. The Union scanners screamed warnings across every channel. On the Union flagship Resolute, Admiral Carell watched the screens with narrowed eyes. "They've doubled their fleet," she said. "They want revenge for their first loss." Her officers shifted uneasily. "Admiral, the humans are still outnumbered. Even with our support we may not hold," Carell did not answer. Her gaze turned to the smaller fleet waiting nearby. The human ships silent and steady, their engines dimmed. She wondered what plan their commander was building in his mind. Aboard the Iron Will, Commander Reed stood before his officers. The holomap showed the swarm moving like a vast black wave. His face stayed calm. "They think we will fight them the same way as before," he said. "That is their mistake." One officer leaned forward. "Sir, they have numbers we cannot match." "We can't outgun them," Reed nodded. "We don't need to outgun them. We just need to outthink them." He pointed to the map. "Look here. The swarm is tight in the center but spread thin on the wings. They always rely on overwhelming numbers. We'll strike where they're weakest, force them to turn, and when they turn we'll cut through their middle." The officers exchanged quick glances. The plan sounded reckless, but they trusted him. Deathworlders were used to turning impossible odds into opportunities. When the swarm entered firing range, the Union fleet held its line, defensive and cautious. Plasma cannons blazed, shields flared, and the void lit up with battle fire. But the swarm pressed harder, pushing the Union back step by step. Then suddenly the human fleet broke formation. Union officers gasped. "They're splitting. They'll be surrounded." The humans didn't slow. Their strike ships darted toward the swarm's wings, diving deep into weak points. Missiles streaked in tight patterns, not random but precise, each one aimed at a joint, a vent, or a fuel core. Swarm ships burst like shattered glass, scattering debris across the void. "Impossible," whispered a Union analyst. "How did they know those spots?" The truth was simple. Humans had studied. They watched every battle, recorded every movement, tested every weapon. They learned faster than anyone else. On the ground, Union soldiers and Valoran civilians listened to the battle reports. Many shook their heads in disbelief. The humans split their fleet. They should be destroyed already. Then why are the swarm ships falling apart? In the refugee shelters, Valoran children huddled around glowing screens. Their wide eyes reflected the sight of human fighters weaving between enemies like hunters among prey. The swarm tried to adapt. They turned their wings inward to trap the human ships. That was when Reed gave his next order. All units cut back through the center. Make them chase like wolves turning on a herd. The human ships wheeled sharply. Their engines flared bright, dragging the swarm into the middle. At the same time, hidden drones, launched earlier and forgotten by the swarm, activated. They struck from behind, slamming into the swarm's rear ships, causing chaos. Union commanders stared in shock. They planned this? They lured them into their own trap. Admiral Carell's lips tightened almost into a smile. She had never seen tactics like this before. Where the Union fought with caution, humans fought with creativity. They used every tool, every risk, every chance. But the true shock came on the ground. The swarm had landed assault creatures on Valora Prime's surface. Great beasts with armored hides and spined limbs marched across the plains, cutting through defenses. The Union soldiers struggled to contain them. Then the humans arrived. Marine squads in heavy armor sprinted across broken terrain, carrying strange weapons. They did not stay in one place. They moved fast, set traps, and used the environment. Where the ground was soft, they dug quick pits. Where the land was sharp rock, they funneled the beasts into narrow paths. Explosions echoed across the plains. Union soldiers watched in disbelief. They fight like they've been here for years. One officer shook his head. No, they fight like their home is worse than this. And it was true. To humans, Valora's fields, even under siege, were not as dangerous as their own jungles, deserts, and frozen wastes back on Earth. Where others saw terror, they saw familiar struggle. In one battle near a Valoran village, a swarm beast smashed through a defense line roaring with fury. Valoran civilians screamed, running for cover. Union soldiers fired, but their weapons barely scratched its armor. Then a squad of humans charged. "On me," shouted Sergeant Hale, his voice steady. His squad spread out, circling the beast. One soldier fired a flare into its eyes, blinding it. Another set explosives at its feet. Hale himself climbed onto its back, driving a plasma blade into a joint. The beast stumbled, shrieked, and collapsed in a crash of dust and fire. The Valorans stared in shock. The humans didn't celebrate. They just reloaded their weapons and moved to the next fight. Back in the Capitol Dome, Counselor Miles spoke with Counselor Erish as they watched reports come in. "Do you see?" Mail said, eyes shining. "They fight as if they were born for this." Erish's hands trembled. "It should not be possible. No species can adapt so quickly. No species can survive such odds. Then perhaps no other species is like them," Mile whispered. Hours stretched into a long night of fire. By dawn, the swarm once again retreated. Their ships scattered into the void, leaving broken wreckage across the system. For the Valorans, it was the second miracle. For the Union, it was a lesson. For the humans, it was just another battle survived. In the aftermath, Admiral Carell called a private meeting with Commander Reed. His face appeared on her holoscreen. "Calm as always, you fight differently," Carell said. "You take risks no one else would. You survive where no one else can." Reed shrugged lightly. "That's what we are, Admiral. We come from a world that never gave us safety. Every day was a battle. If you want to know why we fight this way, it's because for us this isn't strange. This is home." Carell's expression softened. For the first time, she felt not doubt but respect. On Valora Prime, the people gathered in the streets of their crystal cities. For weeks they had lived in fear, expecting their world to fall. Now they looked up at the sky and saw human ships holding guard. Hope, fragile and rare, returned to their hearts. Children asked their parents again, "Who are they?" And the answer came whispered from one to another. "They are humans. They are Deathworlders." But in the dark beyond the system, the swarm was not done. Their commanders studied the battles, puzzled and enraged. This new prey did not act like prey. They acted like predators themselves, and so the swarm began to plan an even greater strike. The war was far from over. The swarm had returned stronger, smarter, and more determined. Their black ships swarmed in massive formations above Valora Prime, blotting out the stars in some sectors. Every Union ship was stretched to its limits, their shields flickering under continuous fire. The Valorans watched from their domed cities, hearts pounding. The humans did not hesitate. Their ships moved with precision, threading through the swarm's attack like needles through cloth. Commander Reed's fleet had shrunk slightly after several hard skirmishes, but morale remained unbroken. "This is it," Reed said quietly on the bridge of Iron Will, studying the swarm's formation. "They want to crush us, end this before dawn. We'll give them what they expect, and nothing more." His officers leaned forward, waiting for the plan. The humans' approach was bold, bordering on reckless. Their small fleet would act as bait, drawing the swarm into a trap unlike anything the galaxy had seen. "Sir," one officer asked, "we will be surrounded." Reed's eyes were steady. "Yes, but they will think they've won. We survive because we fight differently than they expect. We fight because we must." He gestured to the map. "We lure the main fleet to the southern approach, while hidden strike ships hit their rear and flanks. Their coordination is perfect until they face humans who do not follow rules." The officers nodded. It was dangerous, but that was how Deathworlders fought. The Union fleet observed the humans move. Admiral Carroll called her officers together. "They're leading the swarm where they want," she said. "It is risky. They could be destroyed." Her second-in-command frowned. "They are too few. How can they hold?" Carell's gaze never left the screen. "That is why they are different. Watch carefully." The first engagement began at the southern approach. Human ships advanced boldly, shields flaring under plasma fire. The swarm followed, pressing with relentless force. Union officers held their breath. If the humans faltered, the system would fall. But the humans held. They weaved through attacks, each move measured, calculated, deadly. Then, in perfect timing, hidden human strike ships emerged from behind asteroid fields and nebula clouds. Missiles and energy beams struck the swarm's rear, cutting off retreat. The swarm's tight formation broke, panic spreading among their commanders. "They've trapped them," shouted a Union officer, disbelief in his voice. "They planned it all along." On Valora Prime, ground forces prepared for the next wave. The swarm had deployed assault creatures on multiple fronts, tearing through Union defenses. But the human Marines were ready. Squads of soldiers sprinted across broken terrain, carrying weapons designed for speed and precision. They moved in squads of 5 or 6, using traps, mines, and the environment itself. Narrow passes, steep cliffs, and forests became death zones for the swarm's ground forces. A human Marine named Jackson led a squad against a particularly large swarm creature. They dodged its swinging limbs, laying mines and firing at weak points. The creature stumbled into a pitfall trap, screaming as explosives detonated around it. The Marines pressed forward without hesitation. Union soldiers watched from nearby trenches, mouths open. "They are unstoppable," one muttered. Another shook his head. "No, they are not unstoppable. They are something else entirely." Commander Reed monitored both orbital and ground operations from the Iron Will. He coordinated strikes, guided ground squads, and predicted enemy movements. "Strike Team Delta," he said, pointing to the map. "Move behind the eastern ridge. The swarm commander will try to flank. Cut them off before they regroup." "Yes, sir," the officer responded. Minutes later, Delta struck with deadly precision. The swarm commander, a massive ship larger than any other, was forced into a narrow channel between asteroids. Its smaller ships were trapped behind it, unable to maneuver. Explosions erupted and the swarm line fractured completely. On the Union flagship, Admiral Carell could not contain her astonishment. She turned to her officers. "They are tactical geniuses," she whispered. "They fight like they've anticipated every move." Her second-in-command frowned. "They're human. How can they be so organized in the middle of chaos?" Carell shook her head. "I don't know. But they are proving that even a small fleet can change the course of a war." The swarm was desperate. Its commanders realized their mistake. The humans were not just bold, they were unpredictable. No swarm formation could contain them. In the skies above Valora Prime, swarm ships attempted a last-ditch assault on the cities. They fired plasma beams, sending walls of energy crashing toward the domes. Citizens screamed, huddling in shelters. Then human strike ships arrived. Firing arcs carved precise paths through the swarm's fire, redirecting attacks harmlessly into empty space. Their shields absorbed glancing blows. The swarm's attack faltered. A human pilot named Lyra guided her ship through a barrage of plasma fire, leading a small squadron in a daring maneuver. "Follow me," she shouted. They dove into the swarm's midst, creating chaos and confusion. Swarm ships collided, some self-destructing in the confusion. Hours passed. Battles raged both in orbit and on the ground. The humans moved like a single organism, connected by experience, instinct, and unspoken coordination. Valoran citizens peeked through shelter screens. Counselor Mail whispered, "They fight as if the world itself molded them. They are more than warriors." Arish, normally cautious, did not argue. He only nodded slowly. By the second day of the assault, the swarm's command network was broken. Ships moved without coordination. Ground forces scattered in confusion. The humans pressed every advantage, striking the weak points with deadly efficiency. A swarm commander tried one last tactic: concentrate fire on the Iron Will, the largest human ship. Plasma beams struck its hull, shields flickering. But Reed anticipated this. Countermeasures activated. Missiles fired in perfect timing, destroying key swarm ships. The Iron Will survived unscathed. On the bridge, Reed's crew exchanged quiet nods. "Another wave survived," he said simply. "Next, we pushed them off the planet entirely." Meanwhile, on Valora Prime, human ground forces escorted civilians from threatened cities. They fought side by side with Union soldiers, teaching them new strategies, showing how to use terrain and speed to their advantage. A Valoran mother watched as humans formed a protective barrier around fleeing children, facing down massive swarm creatures without hesitation. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "They are saving us." All of us children repeated the word slowly in awe. Humans? Deathworlders? Humans. As the sun rose on the third day, the swarm began a retreat. Ships limped away, some destroyed, others too damaged to continue. Ground forces fell back, beaten and broken. Valora Prime was not saved yet. It was a battle, not a war. But for the first time in weeks, hope returned. Union forces cheered. Valorans cheered. Even Admiral Carell allowed herself a small smile. Commander Reed looked at the reports from both orbital and ground operations. His expression remained calm, but satisfaction was in his eyes. "We fought as we must," he said to his officers. "We protected the planet. We forced them to fear us." One officer asked quietly, "What now, sir?" Reed's gaze turned to the horizon beyond the planet, to the blackness of space where other threats lurked. "Now," he said, "we prepare, because wherever they go next, we will be ready." The Valorans, once terrified of the swarm, began speaking in whispers about the humans. not just as saviors but as legends. The Deathworlders, they called them, the ones who survive when all others fail. And across the galaxy, news of Earth's fleet spread. Other species, previously dismissive of humanity, began to rethink their assumptions. Humans were not reckless. They were not fragile. They were born of a planet that demanded strength, cunning, and survival. And now that strength had arrived in the stars. Above Valora Prime, the dark shapes of their ships vanished into the void, leaving behind smoldering wreckage and twisted metal. The Union fleet hovered cautiously, scanning for any hidden enemies. On the planet's surface, human ground squads patrolled the outskirts of cities, ensuring that no rogue swarm creatures remained to harm civilians. Valorans stepped outside their shelters, blinking in the sunlight. For the first time in weeks, the world felt safe. Birds chirped, the wind moved gently across crystal rooftops, and the smell of fresh water returned to the air. Councillor Mile walked through the streets of the capital, speaking quietly with citizens. They came when everyone else had failed, he said. They fought like our world meant something to them. And because of them, we live. Children followed at his heels, repeating the word with wide-eyed awe. Humans, humans, Deathworlders. Elders nodded in agreement, murmuring about the courage and strange strength of these newcomers. On the Union flagship Resolute, Admiral Carell convened her officers. The battlefield reports were clear. Without the humans, Valora Prime would have fallen. The swarm had been beaten and the Union fleet had survived intact, though shaken. They are extraordinary, Carell said, her voice low. Not just in skill, but in strategy, courage, and adaptability. They take risks no one else would dare. Her second-in-command frowned. They're from Earth, yes? The so-called Death World? I did not think they would last. Carell's eyes hardened. Neither did I, but they've proven that the galaxy has underestimated humans. They will be a force to respect or fear in every corner of space. Meanwhile, Commander Reed stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, looking out at Valora Prime. His crew moved with quiet efficiency, repairing minor damages and logging battle data. Despite the exhaustion in their bodies, their faces held the calm determination of those who had survived far worse on their homeworld. Sir, one officer said, the swarm is retreating. Should we pursue? Reed shook his head. No, we do not chase prey that runs. They will return when they believe themselves ready. We prepare, we protect, and we wait. That is how we survive. He turned to the holomap, studying the positions of remaining swarm vessels. Report every move they make. Learn their tactics. Knowledge is our best weapon. On the ground, human squads helped Valoran engineers repair damaged structures. They shared techniques, showing how to reinforce domes and secure vital resources. Though communication was slow, Valoran languages were soft and flowing, the humans made themselves understood. Simple words, gestures, and demonstrations sufficed. A Valoran engineer whispered to a companion, "They are not just warriors. They are teachers. They saved us and they teach us how to survive." The Union fleet, too, was learning from humans. Officers watched human tactics with keen interest, recording every move. The traditional Union battle doctrine was rigid and careful, but the humans fought with adaptability and courage that no manual could predict. One Union captain admitted quietly to his squad, "If humans were in every fleet, the galaxy would be a different place. They turn every battle into a lesson in survival. Even the swarm, retreating into the dark, carried the memory of human tactics. Their commanders communicated frantic, confused signals. They are not like the others," one whispered. "They adapt. They survive. They fight like predators with no fear," another growled. "We must rethink our approach. No one has ever fought us this way." The swarm's retreat was strategic, but the message was clear. Earth's Deathworlders had changed the rules of engagement. On Valora Prime, a formal ceremony was held to honor the human warriors. Citizens gathered under the open sky. The sun reflected off crystal towers, illuminating both Union and human ships in orbit above. Councillor Miles stepped forward, his voice echoing through the crowd. "For centuries, we Velerans lived in peace. Peace made us strong in spirit but weak in defense. Today, thanks to these warriors from Earth, we have learned another truth. Courage, strength, and survival are gifts that can come in any form. We honor them, not just for saving our world, but for showing us what is possible when fear is set aside." Humans stood quietly, some with helmets off, faces sunburned or marked from battle, but their posture straight and proud. Commander Reed stepped forward, nodding respectfully. "We only did what anyone would do," Reed said simply. "We fight to survive and we fight to protect. That is all." Across Valora Prime, the word spread: humans. They were no longer strangers, no longer unknown newcomers. They were the Deathworlders, a species forged in impossible conditions, able to survive where others would fall. Their legend grew with every whispered story. The pilots who danced through the swarm's claws, the Marines who faced enormous creatures without fear, the leaders who turned tiny fleets into unstoppable forces. Valoran children painted murals depicting human ships and soldiers. Songs began to form, simple chants repeating the word, humans, humans, Deathworlders. Back on the Iron Will, Reed watched the celebrations from orbit. He did not smile broadly, nor did he boast. His crew looked at him, waiting. "They will remember us," he said quietly, "not for glory but for survival, for teaching them to believe that even the impossible can be overcome." One young officer nodded. "Do we stay, sir?" Reed shook his head. "Our job here is done. We hold, we protect, we prepare, but the galaxy is vast. Wherever we are needed next, we go." That is the life of Deathworlders. In the weeks that followed, the Union fleet reorganized. Lessons from the humans were shared across all sectors. Commanders began to rethink strategy, moving beyond rigid formations to incorporate adaptability and creativity, the human way. Even the Valorans, once timid and hesitant, began training in new defensive methods. Where humans had walked, humans had fought, humans had survived. They now learned that survival required courage, adaptation, and willingness to face danger without hesitation. Far beyond Valora, rumors spread. Other species, some previously dismissive of humanity, began to whisper. "They are small in number," one alien said. "But their strategy, their courage, it is unmatched. They are not reckless," another replied. "They are survivors of a world that would destroy anyone weaker. They are Deathworlders." And in some dark systems, the swarm would remember that word with fear. Back on Valora Prime, the people celebrated cautiously. They knew the swarm would return eventually. But for now, they had hope. They had allies. And most of all, they had proof that even when all odds are against them, survival was possible. In the Capitol Dome, Counselor Mile looked up at the sky, where human ships still hovered in orbit. "They fought not for glory," he said softly, "but for life. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all." Children repeated the words again, singing softly, "Humans, humans, Deathworlders." And somewhere far away in the cold void of space, Commander Reed prepared for the next challenge. He did not know where it would come or when. But one truth remained. Humans did not flee. Humans survived. Humans thrived where others would fall, and the galaxy would never forget it.